I'm very pleased to welcome to our next session an entrepreneur who started his journey at WiT Japan in 2015, Eric Gnock, COO and co-founder of Klook, to his homecoming at this 9th edition of WiT Japan and North Asia. So Eric, how are you?
Hi, Siew, Hoon. Good. How are you?
We must stop meeting like this, Eric.
I am making my plans to come see you very soon. It's in the making.
It's in the making. Okay. So, it's a new year. We're coming up to the Chinese New Year too. We allowed a bit of nostalgia. And, you won our Startup of the Year prize at WiT Japan in 2015 and was a very proud moment for us and you. Can you remember what was going through your head at that time, you and Ethan on stage, getting that award?
Yeah, well, what 7 years it's already been. Quite a while, quite a long time, I would say. So much has happened since then. Right? Yeah, but thinking about it, I think I remember, on the last presentation and actually getting the prize, I think my mind back then was numb. It was numb because the night before, we basically pulled an all-nighter and stayed up so late to actually adjust the presentation. So it was quite an eventful night and then doing for a presentation. But it was also a lot of, pride to be able to get such a prize, especially in Japan, where, it also became our top destination market as well.
Right. So you pulled an all-nighter, to present the presentation. Do you remember one key takeaway you got from the judges' comments at that time? Because, we run a lot of startup competition. What was the key takeaway that you got at that event that made you pull that all-nighter to put together that last presentation?
I would say it's the localization part. I think it was interesting, right? Because as not being from Japan, but actually doing a presentation in Japan, having judges who were from Japan, but as well as judges from other places, it was an interesting experience to be in a foreign country. And that actually, they reminded us is to be successful nowadays, you have to really be local. And that's kind of what we adjusted in the presentation and which actually translated into really our day-to-day strategy since then.
Yeah, and talk about, that advice becoming even more true during those last 2 years, right? Because it's all been about localization even deeper than ever before. So, so talk about, So talk about home, right? I'm also curious, I always believe the theme is homecoming, right? And home is where we form our values from which we make life choices and decisions, right? And what was home in Mauritius like for you? And how do you think it shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mauritius is a melting pot of cultures, being Asian, and then you have, African, as a European, and we all live seemingly in a very cohesive environment and dynamics. That's something that I really enjoyed. And that melting pot of culture to me translated into travel, and how travel is basically a universal language. Travel is a melting pot of culture to be able to connect and bridge and understand global matters, people from different point of view. I think that really was the seed that was planted in me that gave me this passion to pursue a career and an entrepreneurship in travel.
Right. So travel is like your bigger Mauritius, actually, just the global Mauritius. So anyway, I remember I interviewed you for the WiT podcast in April 2019 at the start of the pandemic. April 2020. Sorry, I'm losing track of time, at the start of the pandemic. And at that time, we say, okay, it's going to be a year of two halves, right? And then it became 2 years of no half. and so toughest question I'm going to ask you now is, what do you think lies ahead this year?
Yeah, well, I think what lies ahead to us is growth. And that growth means with or without COVID. I think wrapping up year of 2021, we really saw the silver lining of domestic leisure and travel. And we've seen that really take shape and really bring us back to even bigger than pre-COVID level. for the entire company. And hence, we believe that this is continue to be the way to go, is to double down on domestic leisure and travel, which will continue grow with or without COVID on that end. Having said that, I think cross-border is something that we will continue to watch out and prepare for. But I would say it's the doubling down on the domestic travel and leisure.
Right, and sort of cross-border, wait for that train to come later on. Okay, so you announced, I think you said that Japan was one of your biggest destination market in the first half of 2019. You actually announced plans to enter Japan at that year, I think around 2019, and it became your #1 destination. So in this last 2 years, what's happened with the Japanese business, and what are your plans for further localization in Japan in 2022?
Yeah, well, we are glad that actually in 2019, when we made that announcement, we followed on with our actions, and we actually built a local team in Japan, because as we just talked about, localization and being a local run operated company is so important in today's dynamics. So now that we have this local team, we managed to actually pivot our business from having Japan as a #1 destination for inbound travelers to now offering a lot of a very strong domestic offering for local users, particularly I would say in the attraction space. So 2 areas actually that we are working on and seeing very good traction. One is on the attractions front, rolling out more digital solutions for the merchants. And on that end, we even had a partnership with a local leading company called eTix, which is the largest B2B ticket solution provider for the museums category. And then the next category that we're working on is actually with the railways, really preparing the railway company to digitize in order to capture the inbound opportunity. And on that end, last year, we actually did a partnership with Tokyo Railways in launching a first ever, what we call digital train pass for the platform, on our platform.
Right. So really you are going deeper into each destination and therefore doing almost the long tail. You got the attractions, then you got the railways, and then you have car rental, which was an acquisition that you made in 2020 or 2019. You made an acquisition in car rental. And now you're also going into cruises because you've done a global API integration with Dream Cruises. Did that surprise you? Because the cruise business has always been the domain of traditional travel agents, and so that's a real new market. What kind of customer behavior did you see in that cruise market? Did it surprise you?
It is absolutely very surprising. Pre-COVID, we looked at cruises and we felt like cruise is such a niche category. And as you mentioned, it's mainly been dominated by offline type of travel agents. But during the COVID time, one trend that we observe is the fast adoption of digital payments and digital booking, online booking. And hence, even for cruise, we are seeing that major shift. Along with that, I would say that the demand behind it has also changed a bit. It's predominantly pre-COVID been more older generation going on cruise, but now even the young generation, whether it's friends or couples and young families, they also get on cruise. And that absolutely accelerated the digital transformation for this category.
Right. Cruises to Nowhere started in Hong Kong. Have you been on a cruise? Are you one of those new customers that Dream Cruises is targeting? The young millennial customer?
Absolutely, I have. And I think like you mentioned, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and I know that we are going to be launching in even more countries very soon.
Okay, so what else? So you got attractions, railways, car, and then you've got cruises. What other deep local experiences are you, scaling and building, supply up for the return of travel?
Yeah, well, on the staycation category, I would say that that's a new area that we've entered. Is a quasi-hotel category, but we add our spin to it, which is hotel as a destination. So it's not just about how cheap the room is, but the ability to bundle and market and promote the hotel more as an experience. And that's something that we truly believe will continue to stay even in the post-COVID era. As people will look for less hectic trip, they'll take it a bit slower and enjoy a bit more like downtime. And that's where hotel as a destination comes into play. And that's where we're going to be also doubling down in 2022.
Right. You've always had hotels as a standalone product, which is why you, I think, took on Wilfred from Agoda to scale the hotel product. But I guess COVID gave you the opportunity to really now look at hotel as an experience. And that's how you're differentiating yourself from other accommodation-only OTAs. Am I right?
That's right. And any crisis comes with an opportunity. That crisis may have looked like a crisis for a lot of the other OTAs, but for us, we looked at that crisis and says, let's take a spin, let's take our own take on this, and that's where staycation came into play.
Right. And you believe that domestic can sustain a business like yours, because you were built largely on cross-border travel, right? Your whole business model was really on cross-border travel. So how sustainable do you think your business can be on, a purely domestic play for, say, the next 6 months or 9 months? Who knows?
Yeah, well, I would say that, yes, pre-COVID, our business was mainly cross-border. What drove that cross-border direction is because we were going after our users. And where is the millennials going? The first thing that a lot of millennials think about when they have the purchasing power to go travel and spend more, they actually think about getting out of their own country and going on to other destinations. And that's where we then followed them, and along the way, continue to digitize supply and then provide even better service to our consumers. In the post-COVID world, or I guess during the last 2 years, we've basically seen the same group of users, and as well as even obviously the younger crowd that's emerging, are actually discovering more the country, the destination, the home country itself. And that's where we will continue to also help digitize that supply, which has been even more behind than the cross-border supply. So I do believe that this will be here to stay. And in fact, if you look at like countries like China, Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Japan for sure, domestic tourism has always been there, but it just wasn't digitized because it was more group travel. But now FIT is getting on it as well.
Right. So this period has allowed you to really build, 2 pillars of business, right? There's the domestic, and then there's the cross-border, which will come back. So you've got two pillars of business that are stronger. So talking about, sustainability, which is the hot topic right now too, and speaking for your generation, because, you are inheriting the mess and you have to clean up the mess that the older generation has caused on this planet. What's your responsibility at Klook to help your travelers travel better? So for example, talk about one practical thing you're doing. Like, for example, Expedia says that they've stopped selling holidays that include animal-based attractions, right? Agoda, Booking, Expedia, they have badges for hotels that have meet certain criteria. What are you doing practically in this to help your customers travel better?
Yeah, well, I think in the same lens as you mentioned, what the other travel companies have done, we also adhere to the same type of standards, or even I would say higher. So I would say, for example, any products that have, like, for example, shark fin, which is an Asia thing, right? As in maybe in the tour that provides shark fin soup, we actually also don't on board. So we do have quite high standards around these sustainable topic. But the other most important one, as you mentioned, what are we doing to help the new generation? It's an area that we've been tackling since before COVID. And I think after COVID as well, it will continue to stay relevant, which is the concept of over-tourism before. But everyone always would then, squeeze into Tokyo, Osaka, and really makes those destinations just overcrowded. And it's not good for natural resources, for the day-to-day, local people. So we've been working since COVID with these prefecture, for example, in Japan, almost all the 21 prefectures that we are now covering and working with the local DMOs to market and promote, prepare the content, prepare KOLs, etc., to promote that, so that when tourism come back, it doesn't all go back again to the same destinations, but then really diversify that for the destination.
Okay, so really, really dispersed. So on the topic of new, like, you know, Klook getting into cruises. So I want to bring back that conversation. Klook getting into cruises, very interesting change in the distribution landscape for, you know, a real big emerging market in Asia. And you're also seeing e-commerce marketplaces like Lazada, you know, Shopee getting into this space too. Lazada doing something with Dream Cruises, right? What kind of competition do you see coming from these e-commerce marketplaces? Because, you know, they have frequency, they have scale, they got budgets to spend, you know. So how do you see the competition from these players?
Yeah, the ultimate way to, I would say, continue to make our business have a stronger foothold, we start from supply for sure. And the supply that we work on is rather undigitized. It has its own unique needs for which we are the best positioned to go and address that, as we have, you know, a team of almost, you know, 600 engineers that are dedicated to the category of attractions, cruise, etc. Any of the companies, larger ones, I would say potentially, like the e-commerce, they're so diversified that, you know, this may just be one small vertical on the entire platform. So spending time, spending resources with our supply partners, making sure that their needs are addressed using technology, I think ultimately will play to our advantage. And companies that you mentioned actually could become partners. For example, in Southeast Asia, Grab is our key partner. They could have also gone directly to the merchant partners. However, it's just a lot more efficient that it goes through us. Yeah. And especially we have all the technology built in.
Yeah, especially if you got the technology and the supply kind of all sewn up for them, you know, in an API. So in January 2021, which was a year ago, you raised $200 million, you know, and that's brought the total amount that you've raised to over 720 million since founding in 2014. And those funds were used to accelerate the development of your SaaS merchant software, right? You know, so are you seeing definitely an acceleration in adoption by your merchants of this software?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a few areas. Some are driven by local governments that are really pushing that. For example, in Saudi Arabia, with the funding that we have raised, and as well as with this trend, last year we signed a strategic partnership and in fact formed a JV with the largest government-backed travel company to digitize the entire supply chain in Saudi Arabia as we look at Saudi Arabia to become the next key destination in the years to come. In Japan specifically, we've actually spent a lot of engineering resource dedicated for our operators. With the COVID time, certainly it's been very difficult for a lot of attractions, for example, to hire a team and put people at the front of a gate, you know, in consideration of COVID, etc. And we rolled out what we call an express checkout, which allow them to easily do the ticketing as well as payment with just 1 and 2 taps and without having need to employ people by the gate. And we've rolled that out with multiple attraction partners, and we are now ready to scale that as well. So we definitely seeing the demand has increased, and the adoption definitely is catching up as well.
Right. You know, Saudi Arabia, such an interesting story, right? You know, where would you have the opportunity now to see a destination that's really being built from scratch, right? You know, and the Middle East, you know, if you look at Dubai, I mean, that's been open for more than a year, and World Expo is going on. And so, you know, for them, life and travel just goes on and it's normal, while we in Asia are still struggling to come out of our caves, you know. So speaking of our caves, you know, I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and we've talked about metaverses during this event. And William Gibson's Neuromancer novel was set in Japan. Japan somehow inspires sci-fi writers, you know, and the term metaverse was first used in Snow Crash, which was Neil Stephenson's book in 1992. And the character was actually a Japanese character called Hero Protagonist. Now, so do you see metaverse as having real life application with theme parks in particular, you know, attractions, you know, which could lend themselves quite naturally to the idea of having NFTs as well within the metaverse?
Right. Well, you know, with my thin understanding of, you know, the metaverse, you know, concept, I do believe that it will play a part in our life. But I think the biggest unanswered question is, would it ever actually replace the need and desire to connect with people offline and travel the world on an experience, travel from sights, from sound to smell, etc. And I believe that that will remain, you know, a offline physical connection matter. And that's what we stand for. I think the world will evolve whereby metaverse will have a space, but the real person, the physical connection, the sight, sounds, and smell, etc., it will still play to our instinct. And that's what we stand for.
Right, right. So you want to be in the real melting pot versus the virtual melting pot. Okay, so we're going to end up with rapid fire very quickly. So in 2 weeks, we will welcome the Year of the Tiger. And that's a symbol of strength, exercising evils, and braveness. Okay, what's the one strength Klook wants to build up?
An everyday entertainment brand.
Okay. What evil would you like to eject from travel, given the lessons we've learned and hopefully remember?
I would say the over-tourism that I still clearly remember.
Okay. What do you need to get braver at personally, Eric? I'm not saying you're not brave, but what do you need to get braver at personally?
To be as good as you on stage, Hoon. You've always been an inspiration.
Thank
Virtual
you,
stage.
thank you. And what do you think, to our audience in Japan, what do you think travel companies in Japan need to get braver at?
Going global.
Right, absolutely. And sort of build a global Mauritius like you have done with Klook. Thank you so much, Eric. You know, and I wish you a 恭喜发财 in advance, and hope to see you in Singapore, where we can have a Lohei Yishang, you know, to toss for prosperity and safety and health in 2022. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.